My husband was doing something suspicious that made me spy on him, and what I discovered was so adorably dumb. So my husband started this weird routine where he'd disappear into his office every Sunday morning for 3 hours, claiming he was working on a special project. But here's the thing, he works retail management at Best Buy and has never brought work home before in our 8 years together. Like, literally never, not even during Black Friday madness. So naturally I'm thinking affair or midlife crisis. Because who suddenly develops a work ethic at 35, especially when you've spent years complaining about corporate policies? The whole thing started 2 months ago, and at first I didn't think much of it, but then it became this rigid schedule, like he'd set an alarm for 8 a.m. sharp, kiss my forehead, tell me he had important work stuff, and disappear behind that locked office door until noon. And whenever I'd ask, he'd get shifty-eyed, saying things like, oh, just planning for store reorganization, which sounded like complete bullshit, because since when does a retail manager need 3 hours of silence to figure out who's working electronics? So last Sunday I decided to investigate, and I'm not proud of this, but desperation makes you crazy, right? So I told him I was going back to bed, then snuck upstairs in fuzzy socks and pressed my ear against his office door, expecting to hear video calls with another woman. But instead I heard him talking to what sounded like a cooking instructor, saying things like, okay, so the flour goes in first and then the eggs, and should I take notes on mixing technique? And he had this serious, concentrated tone like he was studying for finals. I stood there for 20 minutes listening to him ask questions about batter consistency and cooking temperatures, and I'm thinking maybe he's lost his mind because this is the same man who once burned water trying to make pasta and considers cereal a home-cooked meal when he adds fruit. So obviously I had to dig deeper, and when he left for his grocery run, I went full detective mode and searched his browser history. What I found was absolutely insane. Dozens of YouTube cooking tutorials, bookmarked everything from basic knife skills to advanced pastry techniques, and there was a Pinterest board called Sunday Surprise, filled with elaborate breakfast recipes. And he joined some Facebook group called Beginner Cooks Supporting Beginner Cooks, where he was asking about ingredient substitutions and sharing photos of kitchen disasters. But then I found the smoking gun buried in his Google Drive, a document titled Operation Perfect Wife Breakfast, with detailed meal planning spreadsheets and backup recipes, complete with a timeline ending on our anniversary next month. And guys, I literally started crying, because this whole time, I thought he was cheating. He was actually teaching himself to cook my favorite childhood breakfast. The one my grandmother used to make before she passed last year, those perfect golden pancakes with crispy edges and fluffy centers served with homemade maple butter and fresh strawberries. The breakfast I mentioned missing exactly once during a random conversation about family traditions and how empty holidays felt without her, and he just nodded and squeezed my hand, and I thought he'd forgotten completely. But there it was in his notes, detailed research about her recipe that he'd gotten from my mom, along with modification attempts and practice schedules, and even a backup plan involving frozen pancakes if he couldn't master homemade in time. And when I confronted him yesterday, he got so embarrassed and stammered about wanting it perfect because he knows how much I miss her cooking. Now every Sunday I pretend not to notice him sneaking into the kitchen at dawn, but I can smell pancakes burning and hear him cursing, and the smoke alarm has gone off 3 times. But it's the most romantic thing anyone has ever done, even if he still can't flip them without getting batter on the ceiling.